Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Back from the Dead, America Izuku, written by Anime Geek Girl. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin. Take a swan dive. Okay. Third POV, Izuku, age 14. Izuku Midoriya, a quirkless boy whose dream has always been to be a hero. He was smarter than most kids his age and was good at making strategies. Izuku had been bullied severely by almost everyone, including his childhood best friend, Katsuki Bakugo. He was Izuku's worst tormentor. Izuku's home life wasn't the best either. His mother was abusive and a heavy drunk. The only person who cared about him was his father. Hizashi Midoriya lives in America. He kept in contact with his son, but Izuku never told him about his home life, not wanting to be a burden. That was, until one day when everything changed. It was the last day of middle school and Izuku was packing up, though he was slower than normal, still being sore from the morning beating he got from his mother and his afternoon one from his bullies, when Katsuki Bakugo came up to him. Deku. I don't know how many times I've told you, a quirkless freak like you can't be a hero, so stop trying. Today the teacher decided to out him about wanting to go to the best hero school in Japan, and that set Katsuki off, worse than normal. He grabbed the notebook that was in Izuku's hands and looked at it. It was his hero analysis book, number 13. You still write these stupid things, Katsuki scoffed. He then proceeded to use his quirk and burn the book, walked to the window and throwing it out, the book landing in a pond outside. Izuku stood there not saying a word and just watched. The explosive blonde walked towards the classroom door, but just before he left he turned back to Izuku. You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there might actually be another way. He paused and smirked. Pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life and go take a swoon dive off the roof of the building. He then turned and left the classroom, leaving Izuku all alone. Not knowing that it would be the last thing he would say to him for a very long time. Izuku had gathered all of his things and left the classroom, taking a longer way home so he could have some time to himself. He knew that he would get into some serious trouble from his mother when he did arrive home, but he couldn't find it in himself to care at that moment. I mean, he was just told by his childhood best friend turned bully to kill himself. Yes, Izuku had been told to die by many people, but this felt different. This hit deep. What if Izuku really jumped? What would he do then? Izuku's thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a voice. Ah, you'll make a perfect skin suit for me to hide in. Izuku turned to see a massive green sludge villain. Izuku had seen this villain on TV when his mother was out. He wasn't allowed to watch TV, so he would watch it when his mother wasn't around. It was a new villain that had shown up a few days ago. The heroes were still trying to catch him. Said villain pounced on Izuku before he had any time to react. Sludge began to invade his mouth and he could feel it slide down his throat, suffocating him. Don't worry, it won't take long, just relax. It will only hurt for a minute, you'll feel much better soon. His tone was sinister and it sent an unpleasant shiver down his spine as he clawed at the goo, trying to peel it away from his mouth so he could breathe again, but it was no use. His lungs began to burn with the lack of oxygen and tears formed in his eyes. Useless Deku, die, quirkless freak, why are you still here? Just kill yourself already, no one will miss you if you died. Izuku's mind went wild. Thoughts of all the people who have treated him like SHT dancing around his brain. Why did they have to pop up now? You should just die, no one will miss you. Izuku went limp in the villain's hold and mentally prepared himself for death. It's better this way, he told himself. Detroit smash. Izuku heard a muffled yell before he fell to the ground and gasped for air, only to be cut off by a coughing fit, green goo splattering on the floor beneath him as he coughed. He could feel the goo deep in his lungs as he desperately tried to breathe, banging his fist hard against his chest as he heaved. All of a sudden there was a heavy hit to his back and a big blob of goo tumbled out his mouth, and he was finally able to take a big gulp of air he so desperately needed. Haha, I am glad to see you're okay. I'll be off now. Izuku looked up to see All Might. He questioned, voice raspy, and he coughed a couple more times before he stood on shaky legs. Yes, it is me, All Might, the symbol of peace. He flexed his arms with a wide grin. And Izuku grimaced. Can I ask you a question before you go? Izuku asked, hope laced in his voice. Sure, As long as it's quick my boy, I have a lot of hero work to do, All Might responded, grin sealed on his features. Being a hero, it has been a dream of mine ever since I was a kid, but can I still be one even though I'm quirkless? Izuku asked, looking down at the ground playing with his fingers. It was silent for a good minuet before All Might decided to speak up. Heroes put their lives at risk every day and their quirks are a massive part of it. If you want to help people and save lives, then be a doctor or a policeman. You need to be more realistic, kid. He paused before sighing. So to answer your question, no, you can't be a hero. Find another dream. And with that All Might jumped away with the sludge villain stuffed into a plastic bottle. Izuku stood there for a while, silently staring at the place All Might once stood. Even the number one hero doesn't believe in you. You should just give up. And the thoughts were back, though this time they were louder, and a lot more clearer. Izuku wasn't sure how he got here, but here he was sat on the edge of a 5-story apartment building at about 8 p.m., watching the sunset. You see, after his encounter with All Might he just began walking, letting his instincts lead him as his thoughts ran wild. So in that moment he didn't know where he was going. Izuku sat there and watched the sunset for a good hour before he finally made up his mind. He stood up and took his school jacket off and putting it next to his bag, doing the same with his phone before stepping back onto the ledge, taking a deep breath and looking down. Is this the right thing to do? Izuku thought to himself, everyone hates me, well everyone but Dad, but he isn't even here, will he miss me? A single tear slid down his cheek that he didn't even bother to wipe away before taking another deep breath and tuning around so his back was facing the edge and leaned back, falling off the roof. Izuku's POV, I slowly opened my eyes but was quick to close them again. A blinding light was the first thing that greeted me. I soon opened them again and let my eyes adjust to the bright light. I sat up and looked around, but all I could see was endless white walls. I stood up and did a circle trying to see where I was. I thought I jumped. I died, didn't I? Is this a dream? Hello, I called out, is anyone there? I began to walk in a random direction, looking around as I went. I don't know how long I was looking for, but just as I was about to give up I saw a figure in the distance. Hello, I call again, and the figure turned and began to walk towards me. As I got closer I took in their features, a male with blonde hair with what looked to be a gold tint. Bright blue eyes, sharp jawline and freckles, his face was soft and inviting and he was wearing blue jeans, a plain white shirt with light brown Converse shoes. He looked like a regular person, but I'd never seen him before, so who was he? So you're our summoner, the blonde said, though it sounded like it was more to himself than me. His voice was soft and I strangely felt relaxed and safe. What? Where am I and who are you? I asked hesitantly, tilting my head slightly to the side. The blonde smiled softly, my name is Royal and am a ghost, a ghost. But ghosts ain't real, and if they were I thought they were transparent and like an energy. You might want to sit down, I'm going to explain everything and it will take a while, the blonde I now know as Royal said. I sat down and he sat in front of me. Okay, so if I start from the beginning it will make more sense, I nodded and he continued. I'm part of your quirk, and before you say, I don't have a quirk, you do, your quirk was activated when you died, Royal informed, so I did die. There are more of us, but I will get to that. I'm a ghost, yes, but when you summon me I grow wings and tail, don't ask why, it's just part of the quirk. When I am summoned other people can see me, but when I'm not only you can see me, same with all the other ghosts. You with me so far? Izuku nodded slowly, my power is what I like to call XP coin, basically when I'm in my demon form I can create bronze coins from the inside of my wrists. I have to touch the coins with my thumb and middle finger and it will begin to turn gold. Once it is fully gold it will explode. It takes about 10 seconds to fully ignite and explode, so my coins are basically grenades, Royal explained. Now on to you, your quirk is to summon us, that's kind of it, though you do have another power, you can call it what you like, but basically you can summon the dead, they will listen to your commands and seep back into the ground when you deactivate your quirk. It takes energy to use and you'll need a lot of practice, but I'm sure you'll get there, Royal finished. I sat there in silence for a while, taking and processing the information. So, let me get this straight, I started after a while. I have 2 quirks, Royal nodded, I can talk to ghosts that I can summon, to what, help me fight. Yep, the ghosts you can summon are ones that either haven't moved on and are stuck in the afterlife or wanted to stay by their own free will. There are 6 of us, including me, Royal said with a smile. I nodded. Okay, how do I summon you? I asked. Good question, but you'll have to figure that out yourself. Why? It's just something you have to do, you're good at analysis, right? So use it to figure it out. I believe in you, Royal said, standing up and reaching his hand out towards me. Why don't I show you the other ghosts so you can get acquainted with them before you go back to your world? I nodded and let him pull me up. Once I was to my feet, Royal pulled me towards a door. When the hell did that get there? He opened the door and we went through. Wow, I breathed. This is where us ghosts live, if you will, when we aren't in your presence, like when you sleep or if you want to be alone. This is where we go, Royal informed, gesturing to the open area. There were little cabins, all different colors, some bright, some dark. There were mountains in the background along with a forest. A big blossom tree hung over a large lake that reflected the orange and pink sunset. The meadows surrounding the cabins were filled with different types of flowers. It was like something made out of a fairy tale. It's appealing, Royal smiled. I'm glad you think so. Come along, the others are dying to meet you. Third POV, Royal took Izuku into a gray cabin, one of the biggest ones there were. It was like a dining hall, where even from the outside you could hear excited chatter only for it to stop when the door opened, revealing Izuku and Royal. Royal walked in first, Izuku in tow, and stood in front of the table with the greenette behind him. As you all know, our summoner has arrived. I have explained most things to him other than your names and your powers, so one at a time please introduce yourself, Royal informed the group and stepped aside to show Izuku. The first to stand was a petite girl. She had long white hair with pink strands, green eyes, and was wearing a pink flowery dress. She bounced on over to Izuku with a wide smile and stuck her hand out towards him. My name is Echo, it's nice to meet you, the girl said excitedly. Izuku smiled a small smile and shook her hand softly. My name's Izuku, it's nice meeting you too, you seem bubbly, he said hesitantly. But when the white and pink hair girl giggled, he felt a little more comfortable. Yeah, I suppose bubbly is quite accurate, she smiled. The next to introduce themselves was a girl and boy, though they looked quite similar. They both had dark curly hair with dark green eyes, but if you looked closer you could see that the girl's eyes were slightly lighter than the boy's. The girl was wearing cargo shorts and a cropped jumper while the boy wore cargo briefs and a hoodie. The girl was the first to speak. My name is FaZe, this is my twin brother Casper. She jabbed her thumb in the direction of the male next to her, him, also Echo's girlfriend. It's nice to meet you. She stuck her hand out for a handshake, which Izuku took with another small smile. It's nice to meet you too. He turned to Casper, and you. They all smiled and moved aside as the last two came up to him. The name's Shaze, the man Shaze said. He was tall, at least 6 feet, and had long black hair, but when the light caught it you could see a blue tint, tied into a ponytail, deep violet eyes, and he was wearing ripped jeans and a tank top. This is Vex, he's a little shy. Shaze pointed to a slightly smaller boy, maybe 5 feet 10, so not much shorter than Shaze himself. He had shoulder-length gray hair with matching gray eyes. Even though he looked kinda menacing, his facial features stayed soft and welcoming. Hey, it's nice to meet you, Izuku said with a slightly bigger smile than before, not feeling so uncomfortable anymore. Now that we are all acquainted, Royal clapped his hands together to get everyone's attention. There are a few more things I need to tell you about your quirk, Royal said and gestured for everyone to sit down. Once everyone was seated, Royal continued, there isn't much really. First you need to train both of your quirks to the best of your ability. Your quirks do have limits, so try not to go over them until your body is ready to do so. Second, you need to learn how to summon us and then we can help you train. Thirdly, you can still get hurt but you heal quicker than average since you're technically already dead. And finally, you can't die. Well, you can, but you can wake up as soon as you like. You'll turn into a ghost like us, so no one will be able to see you but us. All you have to do to wake up is touch your body. There are no limits to it, Royal finished with a smile. Izuku sat there and took the information in before slowly nodding his head. Okay, thank you for explaining everything to me. Izuku bowed his head. There's no need to thank me, that's what I'm here for, Royal said with a soft smile as he stood. Let's get you back to your world. Izuku waved goodbye to everyone as he was once again dragged out by Royal. However, Izuku didn't seem to care as he was too busy stuck in his head. What in holy hell is going on with my life? Izuku thought to himself with a sigh. Izuku opened his eyes slowly, it was dark out, and as he sat up he realized that he was led on the ground in a puddle of his own blood, though he himself was completely uninjured, just an ache in his spine from the hard fall to the ground. He stood up and slowly made his way up the staircase back to the roof. Once he made it, he sat on the edge once again after grabbing his phone that he had left there previously, and checked the time. 9:30, Izuku whispered to himself, so he jumped off a roof half an hour ago only to wake up in a puddle of blood but relatively uninjured, and he had a quirk. It wasn't some crazy but dream, he actually had a quirk. Well, two to be exact, but a quirk nonetheless. Izuku pulled up his dad's contact and after an internal battle with himself, he hit the call button. Not even 3 rings later and his dad answered. Izuku. Is everything okay? You don't normally call this late. He could hear the worry in his dad's voice through the phone, but Izuku stayed silent for a moment, not really knowing where to start. Izuku. Buddy, you there? Dad, Izuku finally replied after another few seconds of silence, his voice wobbly. There was a sigh of relief on the other end of the call. What happened, Izuku? I have a quirk. Though his answer was blunt, his voice gave away his distress. Well, I have too, but you get it. Izuku's voice cracked. What do you mean you have a quirk, Izuku? His dad's voice was soft, however you could hear that he didn't quite believe him. Promise you won't hate me? Izuku asked quietly. I promise, his dad replied instantly, and Izuku took a deep breath before telling him everything that had accrued that day. Third POV, Izuku's age, 14. It was the next day and Izuku was pacing in his room. The night before he had explained everything to his dad. And when I say everything I mean he told him about all the bullying and his mother's abuse. He told his father about his addiction to weed and cigarettes that he stole from his mother whenever he got the chance, though he explained that he only smokes when he was stressed or couldn't sleep. He has insomnia and he smokes to help him sleep sometimes. And what happened with All Might and the sludge villain. Then finally ending with him killing himself, and explained what happened with Royal and the other ghosts he interacted with. His dad had listened to everything with an open mind and comforted his son the best he could from another country, not judging him in any way. Is America and Japan a country? I'm stupid and know nothing about countries. At the end of Izuku's explanation, his dad had taken the time to process all the information and come up with a solution. You should come live with me. I won't be around all the time since I'm the #1 hero here in America, but I will be there for you as much as I can. Plus the house is quite lonely and way too tidy for my liking. I have no one here to come and fill it up and make a mess of, had been Hizashi's words. It took some convincing, Izuku not wanting to be a bother or burden to his father, but eventually he agreed. So now Izuku was in his room waiting for his dad to call or text him. His father had told him before he hung up the phone the night before that he would sort everything out, even sending one of his bodyguards to help Izuku on the flight over and keep him safe. He had his bags packed, which were only his backpack with notebooks and other little thing and his duffel bag with some clothes, and was now pacing around his room with his phone clutched in his hand, awaiting his father's call. Izuku was planning on disappearing, not even writing a note to his mother or even to Katsuki. Though Izuku was sure that if he did the blonde wouldn't care anyways. He was going to fly to America and live with his dad. He was going to disappear into thin air. No more bullying, no more neglect and abuse. Only the warm, safe and comforting environment his father had always created for him. Even when he found out he was quirkless, Hizashi never once degraded his son for it, only ever praised him for the little things he did and helped him grow as a person, even when he moved to America and started only talking to him over the phone. Hizashi was still there for him, was always his safe place. Izuku was snapped out of his thoughts by his phone ringing. He halted his pacing and looked down at the device. It was his dad. He hit the accept button and held his phone to his ear. Hello, Izuku greeted. Hey son, you doing okay? The question was said softly from the other end of the call. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Inko hasn't showed her face since last night, so she's probably out drunk in some dude's bed. I'm a little sore though, since just before she left she decided to add to my collection of scars. Izuku responded truthfully with an exhausted sigh, rubbing at his forehead with his spare hand. Yeah, I'm sure she is, and I'm so sorry you have to go through that, but you won't have to deal with her again, so she doesn't matter right now. what matters is that I'll be seeing you in person for the first time in 5 years by the end of the day. How exciting is that? Hizashi's voice switched from sad and worried to happy and excited like a light switch. Izuku couldn't stop the small smile that spread across his lips even if he had tried. Super exciting, Dad, I can't wait, Izuku responded with a small chuckle. Well, you should get a knock on your door in about 10 minutes. One of my best bodyguards will help you move. Well, he's more of a friend than a bodyguard, but when I do interviews and stuff he always comes with. His name is Cody, Hizashi explained. Okay, I'll keep an ear out for him. Izuku paused for a moment. Hey Dad, he asked quietly. What's up, buddy? Hizashi questioned, his cheerful tone replaced with a hint of concern once again. Thank you for everything, Izuku answered in a whisper. Don't mention it, son, I'm just glad that I could get you out of that house and away from all the people that have wronged you. Izuku could hear the smile in his dad's voice. I'll see you later tonight, Izuku, have a nice flight. I love you, Hizashi said sincerely. See you soon, Dad, love you too. Izuku pulled his phone away from his ear and hung up. He shoved his phone into the back pocket of his jeans with a sigh, then walked around his room to collect his 2 bags. He shut his bedroom door behind him, then dumping his few bags on the floor by the front door before sitting on one of the couches in the sitting room. I wonder what it's like in America. Will I be able to make friends? I should change my appearance and my personality so no one can hurt me as easily. I can ask Dad to help me with my confidence. Izuku thought to himself with a nod. Izuku was only sat in his living room for about 5 minutes before he heard 3 firm knocks on the front door, efficiently pulling him from his thoughts. He got up from his chair and walked to the door, unlocking it before opening it. There stood a tall man, about 6 feet, with light brown hair that was slicked back. He was wearing a nice black suit and white dress shirt that was tucked firmly into his breaths with matching dress shoes. A red tie hung from his neck, finishing the look. You must be Mr. Midoriya's son, it's a pleasure to meet you. He stuck his hand out towards Izuku for a handshake. My name's is Cody. Izuku hesitantly shook his hand. And my name's Izuku. It's nice to meet you. Izuku gave a small smile as he dropped his hand back down to his side. We must get going if we want to catch our flight on time. Are you ready to go? The bodyguard Cody said. Izuku nodded and grabbed his bags before stepping out the house. He crouched down and put his key underneath the mat that was in front of the door before standing again. He wouldn't need it anymore anyway. Cody reached for Izuku's duffel bag, but Izuku flinched back. My apologies, my intentions were not to startle you, I was just going to assist with carrying your bags to the car, Cody said in a surprisingly soft tone, retracting his hand back to his side. Hizashi had told him about his ex-wife's abuse towards his son. Cody was just as upset about it as Hizashi was, and he didn't even know the kid. Cody could tell that Izuku was abused just by looking at him. He had a slightly bruised cheek which looked like a hand print, and it looked fairly fresh. If you looked closer you could see scars on his face, one just over his eyebrow, another on his cheek and forehead. They weren't very big but you could still see them. Oh, thank you for the offer but I got it, Izuku said quickly. Cody raised an eyebrow. You sure? Izuku nodded. Okay, if you're sure, now come on, we must get going. Cody led the way to the car that was parked on the street and helped Izuku put his bags in the trunk and opening the door to the back seat, making sure Izuku was buckled up and ready before getting in himself and starting the engine. And finally, they were off to the airport. Time skip. I don't know how airports work or anything about plane seating arrangements, so I'm just gonna skip to when they are on the plane and in their seats. Cody let Izuku have the window seat for 2 reasons, so Izuku didn't have to sit next to a stranger. And, because he thought the kid would like to see out the window and watch the sun go down in a few hours. Cody didn't have any kids but he was good at reading people. He could tell that Izuku was nervous and slightly uncomfortable and wanted to make him relax a little. You should try and get some sleep. It's about a 12 to 13 hour long flight, so I'm sure you don't want to be awake for that long, Cody questioned once they had taken off, turning to Izuku who shrugged. It's okay, I have insomnia so I struggle to sleep, but I have my sketch pad, notebooks, and my music, so I'll be okay, promise. Izuku flashed a smile before turning to look out the window. Cody stared at him for a moment in concern before turning back to his book that he had brought. After about 10 minuets of staring out the window, Izuku leant down and opened his backpack that was by his feet. He grabbed his phone and headphones, putting on a playlist, then grabbing his sketchpad. Opening to a new page, he decided that he would draw the plane wing and the sky, first starting with a rough sketch before adding more detail, and then he took out his colors and began to color the sky. Not my art, I found it on Google, so whoever made it gets the credit. Cody looked up from his book when he heard the sound of pencil on paper. He had been so invested in his book that he hadn't heard Izuku start drawing until now. He looked over to Izuku just in time to see him finishing up his plane drawing. "That's a very fine piece of artwork," Cody commented. Getting no response, he looked up to Izuku and realized he had headphones in, so he just turned back to his book and left Izuku in his own little world. Every now and again Cody would look over to Izuku to see what he was up to, only to find Izuku drawing different little sketches, some big, some small. It was about 5 hours into their flight when he felt a tap on his forearm. He looked over to Izuku, seeing he had put his sketchpad and pencils away and had his headphones resting on his lap. "What's up, kid?" Cody asked quietly, not wanting to disturb anyone on the plane along with the stranger beside him, he having noticed a while ago that they had fallen asleep. "Look," Izuku pointed out the window. Cody leant towards the window slightly as Izuku moved back to give him room. "Isn't it appealing?" Izuku whispered with a small smile as he stared out the window. Cody showed a rare smile and nodded. "It sure is," he responded, moving back to sit up in his seat. A few minuets of silence passed by, Izuku staring out the window and Cody checking how much longer the flight would be. They left around 4 p.m. and it was about 9 p.m. now. They would land in about 6 hours at around 3 in the morning. "I have no idea if you can have a flight that late or land that early, but for the sake of my story it's going to work as it is. Will you be alright alone for a few minuets while I use the bathroom?" Cody asked, looking to Izuku again. "Yeah, I'll be fine," Izuku nodded. "Alright, I'll be back in a moment." Cody stood from his seat and carefully stood over the stranger's legs and quietly made his way to the bathroom. Izuku paid no mind to the bodyguard and continued to stare out the window for a few more minuets before putting his headphones back in. He leant his head back against his chair and closed his eyes. He didn't think he would be able to sleep, but it didn't hurt to try. Cody came back a few minuets later, climbing over the stranger's legs once again and sitting back in his seat. He noticed Izuku had his eyes closed with his arms crossed over his stomach, headphones lodged in his ears. He could tell Izuku was asleep by the steady rise and fall of his chest. Cody took his jacket off and carefully placed it over Izuku before settling back down in his seat once again and continuing to read his book. Izuku woke up a few hours later to someone shaking his shoulders slightly. He slowly opened his eyes, blinking a few times to adjust to the light before looking to his left where Cody was. Said man smiled at him. "We'll be landing soon," Cody pointed out the window. Izuku turned his head in curiosity, this time looking out the window. Izuku stared in awe at all the tall buildings and the sparkling lights. "My new home," he thought to himself before breaking out into a grin. He continued to look out the window practically the rest of the way until they landed. Once landed, Izuku followed Cody out the plane to the bagging area where they grabbed his duffel bag before walking outside. Cody led Izuku halfway down the road where a nice silver car was. Another tall man stood outside said car, though this man looked older. His hair was gray and he had a slight slouch, his hands locked together behind his back. "Good morning, Cody," the older man greeted, then looked to Izuku and held out his hand. "You must be Izuku. My name is Alan. In your father's personal driver I will be taking you to your father's home where he is waiting for you," the man, Alan, said while Izuku shook his hand. "It's nice meeting you," Izuku said. The man smiled and opened the door to the back seat. "Should we get going?" Izuku nodded and got in, Cody getting in next to him. They all buckled up and began their drive to Hizashi house. Half an hour later they pull up to a house, well, more like a small mansion. Izuku stared out the window in awe. It wasn't huge, but it was such a nice-looking house, and it was bigger and prettier than any apartment or house he had lived in with his mother. The car slowed to a stop and Cody grabbed Izuku's bags, this time with little to no problem as Izuku was distracted, too busy looking at the house from the car window. The front door swung open just as they got out. There stood Hizashi with a huge grin. "Izuku," he exclaimed and rushed down the steps towards his son. Once close enough he squeezed Izuku into a tight embrace, one that Izuku reciprocated just as tightly. The picture up top is what Hizashi looks like just with red eyes. "Ah, it's so good to see you in person again, you've grown so much." Hizashi pulled back and held Izuku by his shoulders to scan over his body. Izuku wasn't small but he wasn't tall either, as he was in the middle of his growth spurt. He was about 5 feet 6, so not that tall. He noticed that his hair had began to change color ever since he died. So instead of dark roots going into light bushy green, it's now dark roots going into a light shade of blue. It was still spreading, so he still had some green left, but he didn't think it would last long. Well, at least he didn't have to dye his hair anymore. "Your hair, did you dye it?" Hizashi asked curiously. Izuku shook his head. "It's my quirk, the green won't be there much longer I suspect," Izuku mumbled as he played with the tips of his hair for a moment. Hizashi's smile faded for a moment, remembering what Izuku had told him, but his face lit up again a second later. "Well, you must be exhausted from your flight over, and it's like 4 in the morning, so dash." Hizashi looked over Izuku's shoulder to where Cody and Alan were stood waiting for further instructions. "You two can go home and get some rest. I shoot you a text if I need anything. Have a good night and thank you for bringing my son to me safely." Hizashi smiled. "It was my pleasure, sir," they said in unison. Once the two men had got in their cars and left, Hizashi turned to his son again. "Come on, let me show you your room so you can rest. I'll give you a tour tomorrow." Hizashi led Izuku through the house and into a room with a big king-sized bed and a dresser that rested next to it. "We can go shopping tomorrow for some things so you can decorate. I'll see you in the morning, Izuku. Get some sleep, okay?" Izuku nodded and hugged his dad tightly. "Thank you, Dad, this means a lot to me," he whispered, hugging his dad a little tighter before letting go. "Don't worry about it, Izuku. I was happy to let you stay here. Now get some rest, you've had a long day." Hizashi turned and walked out, shutting the door behind him. Izuku sighed and flopped onto his new bed. He stared at the ceiling for a while, just going over the events of the last few days. First he was beaten by his mother, then he was told to kill himself by his childhood friend turned bully, then he was attacked by a villain and almost choked to death, then got saved by the #1 hero, getting his dreams crushed by said hero, therefore ending up on a roof where he jumped and killed himself. Following this he found out he had a quirk and ultimately finding himself living with his dad in America. Yet, it didn't feel real. Izuku felt as if the last few days were just some messed up dream. Like when he woke up tomorrow, he'd be back in his bedroom, back in the hands of his abusive, drunk mother. Izuku sighed again as he sat up. He opened his duffel bag and changed into some joggers and a shirt that had the words "shirt" written in bold in the middle of it before slipping under the covers and closing his eyes. He didn't think he would be able to sleep, but he sure as hell was gonna try. Third POV, Izuku woke up to the smell of bacon and eggs, which was very unusual since his mother never cooked. He opened his eyes and looked around, realizing that he wasn't in his room. He sat up and rubbed his eyes before staring into space. As his mind started to catch up to him, he realized that he was in his dad's house, in his new room. He sighed and got out of bed, slipping his slippers on and making his way out the room. He walked down the hall to the stairs and slowly walked down and around the corner, then down another hallway where he followed the smell of food to the kitchen. The kitchen. Izuku walked over and sat at one of the chairs in front of the kitchen counter. The sound of the chair moving alerted his father, who turned around and smiled at his tired-looking son. "Good morning, hope you slept well," his father greeted, way too enthusiastic for this early in the morning. He placed a plate of food in front of Izuku before grabbing his own and sitting next him. "Morning," Izuku mumbled as he stared at his food. It looked and smelt amazing, but since his mother never let him eat, whenever he had the opportunity to eat a full meal he was only ever able to eat a little bit, maybe half if he was lucky. "What's wrong?" his dad asked softly from beside him, noticing that Izuku wasn't touching his food. "Nothing, just not hungry, sorry Dad," Izuku mumbled again and pushed his food away a little. "It's because of Inko, isn't it?" his dad asked, turning in his seat a little to look at Izuku better. With a frown on his face, Izuku sighed. "I hate that you know that now," he muttered, and Hizashi chuckled. "Why? 'Cause you know I'm going to be on your case, tell you to eat and help you get healthy again?" he questioned with a raised eyebrow. "Yes," Izuku deadpanned. "Well, you gotta get used to it. Can you try and eat at least a little bit?" Hizashi asked. His tone changed from playful to soft in a matter of seconds. Izuku sighed. I can try. He brought his plate closer again and took a small bite. Hizashi smiled and rubbed Izuku's shoulder before going back to his own food. Izuku managed to eat about 1/4 of his food before pushing it away, all the while apologizing to his dad. It's okay buddy, why don't you go clean up and then we'll go shopping for some things for your room, and some clothes. Hizashi sent him off as he stood and went to clean all the dishes. Izuku sighed once again but complied and went back to his room. He rummaged through his duffel bag, grabbing some clean boxers and socks, then pulling out a plain shirt and some plain black jeans. He walked into the bathroom with his clothes and dumped them on the counter. He closed the bathroom door and walked to the shower, turning it to the temperature that he wanted, then stripping. He put all of his dirty clothes into the hamper that was in the corner before stepping into the shower. This is the bathroom. He stood under the water for a few minuets just enjoying the warmth. His mother never let him use hot water, so he only ever had cold showers. Eventually he started to wash himself. He washed his body before rinsing, then he scrubbed his long hair. Once he was down he turned the water off and stepped out, grabbing one of the towels that was under the sink and wrapping it around his waist. He walked out the bathroom to grab his hairbrush and toothbrush before walking back in. He brushed his teeth, then put his clean clothes on before brushing his hair and putting it into a ponytail. He looked at his reflection in the mirror once he was done and sighed. I don't look homeless for once, he mumbled to himself with a faint smile playing at his lips. Alan showed up at the house with Cody and took them all to the mall. Cody followed Hizashi and Izuku around all day as they went around getting things for Izuku's room. Once they had got everything that the 15-year-old needed, they headed back to the house. Alan and Cody helped Hizashi and Izuku get everything into Izuku's empty room before going home, as Hizashi told them to, as they didn't need to go anywhere else that day. So do you need help with anything? Like putting your desk together or anything? Hizashi asked, putting the last bag of clothes down on Izuku's bed. No, it's okay, I can do it, Izuku replied with a small smile. You know I don't mind helping. You sure? Hizashi asked again, just to make sure. I can do it Dad, too, just want to be alone for a while whilst I do it, Izuku said hesitantly. Oh, of course son, I'll be in my office if you need me, and I'll give you a proper tour of the house before dinner. Hizashi smiled before leaving, shutting the door behind him, leaving Izuku to his own devices. Izuku looked around his room. There were boxes filled with furniture, bags filled with clothes and decorations, all scattered around in different corners, on his bed and in the middle of the floor. Izuku sighed, deciding to put all of his new clothes away first, since that was probably be easiest. But first he grabbed his phone and put on a random playlist. He walked around looking in all the bags and picking up all the ones with clothes in and dumping them on his closet floor. Once he had all of them, he started organizing them, hanging all his hoodies and shirts, folding all his jeans and shorts, putting them in the drawers as well as all his boxers and socks before putting his new shoes in their rightful places. The closet, but he has darker clothes. Once he was done, he collected all the bags and shoved them all in one before putting them on his bed. Next he went to the corner of his room a little bit away from his bed and started to unbox and make his desk. Once he put it all together, it took a lot longer than he thought. Following the instructions didn't seem to help much. He went to grab his dad. Izuku wanted to put up a shelf, just above his desk, so he could put some of his notebooks up there. Izuku knocked on his dad's office door, only walking in when he heard his dad's soft, "Come in," from the other side. Hey Dad, can you help me put up a shelf in my room please? Izuku asked shyly. Hizashi smiled. Of course I can bud. Hizashi followed Izuku back up to his room and put the shelf up for him before retreating back to his office, not before promising to help with anything Izuku needed as long as Izuku asked. Izuku decorated his desk with a lamp and books in the corner, a pen pot next to them and his laptop that stood on a stand. Like this, but again there is a shelf above it and there are no books scattered everywhere. Next Izuku put his new bedding on and made his bed. It wasn't anything too fancy, but Izuku liked it, so he wasn't complaining. He put his guitar against the wall next to his bedside table out the way so it wouldn't get broken. This is his bed, ignore the chair in the background. The side tables can stay thumbs up. In the image next to the chairs the balcony is there and the closet is opposite the bed and the bathroom is next to it. Just so you can get a feel of the room. Hope it makes sense. Izuku opened his balcony door and stepped out. It was completely empty, but he could already picture how he wanted it. He looked past the railing to look out at the view. It was basically just a field, but there were flowers and trees surrounding the area and the sun was high in the sky. The whole scenery was appealing. Bit like this, I'm sorry isk at describing stuff. Izuku let a smile slip onto his features as he began to decorate his balcony. This is his balcony, but imagine the field is in the background and a sliding glass cover that he can close if it rains or something so the inside of the balcony doesn't get wet. Time skip, dinner. Izuku finished his room and had shown his dad. He was fairly proud of himself since he did it all by himself with the exception of the shelf that his dad put up for him of cows. Hizashi gave Izuku a tour of the whole house, Izuku's favorite room being the library. There were shelf stacks with books. And there were couches and beanbags littered around. Izuku loved it and he couldn't wait to sit in there and read. It was about 7 p.m. when the father-son duo had eaten dinner. Izuku was quite hungry after the busy day he had, so he was able to eat almost half his food before pushing it away. "What's my school situation?" Izuku asked randomly. He was helping Hizashi with the dishes, a comfortable silence surrounding them, but he was curious about what his school situation was going to be like. "Well, there's a school that I think will be good for you. Yes, it is a hero school, the top one here in America," his dad responded, handing the last dish to Izuku and drying his hands before turning to him, folding his arms over his chest and resting his hip against the counter. "Okay, when do I start?" Izuku asked as he put the last dish away in its rightful place in the cupboard and then mirrored his father's position. "In 6 weeks, Alan will drive you to school and pick you up, as well as I'll be working, but I'll be home every day before dinner unless there is a complication with any villains. Then I'll shoot you a text to let you know that I'll be home late," Hizashi explained with a grin. "Okay," Izuku said with a nod. "Why don't you have an early night, seeing as you've had a long day, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow over breakfast? How's that sound?" Hizashi asked his son as he moved from the kitchen to his office, Izuku following not far behind. "Yeah, okay, see you in the morning then, Dad," Izuku replied. It was only about 7:30 p.m. but he had a long day and was tired, so he didn't complain. Not that he would anyway, I mean it's his dad and his dad did everything for him. Izuku didn't think he had it in him to be disrespectful even if he tried. Izuku gave his dad a quick hug before moving past him to the stairs and headed up to his room. Izuku entered his room and closed his door behind him. He walked to his bed and flopped onto it and stared up at the ceiling. Izuku's mind started to go haywire about everything that has happened once again, but before he could get too deep he felt a presence and sat up. He was surprised to see Royal standing in front of him with a gentle smile. "What are you doing here, Royal?" Izuku asked with a tilt of the head. "You were thinking too much, thought I would come and rescue you," he replied in his soothing voice that had Izuku relaxing as soon as it met his ears. "Thank you," Izuku replied with a grateful smile. "No need to thank me, I can stay and we can talk about anything you want until you fall asleep," Royal said as he sat on Izuku's bed, facing him. "Thank you," Izuku said again, but the look on his face told Royal that he didn't need a response, so he just opted to just sitting there until Izuku got ready for bed, and they began to talk about a mass variety of topics until Izuku fell asleep. Once asleep, Royal returned back to his home where the other ghosts were, filling them in on what happened with Izuku before they talked about random topics. Royal smiled to himself. He liked that he could leave his home every once in a while now that Izuku had activated his quirk. It was freeing. I didn't know how to end this chapter, but hope you liked the story so far. Remember, I would love to read you feedback about my story, so please comment if you wish to. Third POV, Izuku age, 15. 6 weeks went by faster than Izuku would have liked. His 15th birthday had been 2 weeks ago and he had a lot of fun. His dad took him shopping and then they had lunch together. After that they went home and watched movies until dinner. His dad took him to a restaurant. It was too fancy and too full of people for Izuku's liking, but he never once complained. Plus the food was amazing, so it wasn't too bad. The day ended with a walk on the beach. They chatted about random things as they watched the sunset. It was the best birthday Izuku has ever had. Considering his mother never celebrated his birthday, Izuku definitely appetite everything his father did for him. Izuku had stayed up all night, nervous for his first day at school the next day, so here he was, sat in the back of Alan's car, coffee in hand, staring out the window looking like he was about to pass out at any moment. He was wearing some black ripped skinny jeans, a gray hoodie over the top of a plain white shirt and black Converse shoes. They soon pulled up outside of his new school and a new wave of anxiety hit Izuku like a punch in the chest. "Here we are, I'll pick you up after school, okay?" Alan told him, turning in his seat to look back at Izuku, who nodded. "Thank you," Izuku said with a small smile. He opened the door and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Izuku watched the car drive off before looking at the building in front of him. Pushing his anxiousness down, he put his headphone in his ears, put on a random playlist and walked into the school. This is gonna be a long day, Izuku thought to himself. Izuku had managed to go through half his day without a hitch. He kept his head down and took notes on everything he thought was important in his classes, though almost everything they were teaching he already knew. Due to him not having friends since he was 4, he started to teach himself anything and everything. Every chance he got he would read new books or do research online. Izuku was always smarter than most kids his age, but he tried to not let it show as he was afraid he would get bullied like he did in middle school. Even the teachers hated the fact that he was smarter than the other kids. He was quirkless. How can a quirkless kid be smarter than kids with quirks? The teachers always marked his work wrong, so he didn't seem smart. Izuku was afraid his new teachers would do that too, but Izuku did notice that his new teachers do seem a lot nicer than his old ones. Anyway, Izuku was making his way to the cafeteria, his headphones once again lodged into his ears, hands stuffed into his pockets, when he heard a couple of shouts behind him, but before he could turn to see what the commotion was, he felt a body collide with his own and he tumbled to the ground with a weight on his chest. "Ah, SHT, sorry man," the voice came from the person who had bumped into Izuku. He was quick to get off him and help Izuku to his feet. "The name's Enzo, sorry for bumpin' into you, couldn't turn out the way quick enough," the guy we now know as Enzo spoke as he brushed himself off. "Oh, no problem," Izuku replied hesitantly. He wasn't used to people apologizing for their own mistakes. People would just blame it on him, saying he was in the way or something to get him in trouble. This was new for him. Enzo opened his mouth to speak again but was interrupted when a girl a little shorter than Enzo himself walked up behind him and slapped the back of his head. "What did I tell you about riding your skateboard inside?" the girl asked angrily. "Don't do it, 'cause I might hurt myself or someone else," Enzo replied with a sigh, rubbing the spot on his head where the girl had hit. "Exactly, and look what you did. You didn't listen and you flattened this poor boy." The girl then turned to Izuku, who had been standing there awkwardly, and stuck out her hand. "My name is Sage, I'm sorry about him, he's reckless." Izuku shook her hand. Izuku Midoriya, nice to meet you, and it's not a problem, I'm used to people bumping into me," Izuku replied nervously, mumbling the last part so the others didn't hear. "You're new, aren't you?" Sage asked as she looked the boy up and down. She didn't recognize him. Yeah, I moved here to live with my father a month ago," Izuku answered with a short nod. "You want to sit with me and my friends?" she asked, turning to walk in the direction of the cafeteria again. "Oh, yeah sure," Izuku mumbled as he followed along behind Sage and Enzo. This was not what Izuku was expecting. Well, he didn't know what he was truly expecting, but it wasn't a group of people with entirely different personalities. Izuku had followed Sage and Enzo the rest of the way to the cafeteria and to a table in the back corner where a group of people were. Izuku had introduced himself and sat down in between two people. A girl with orange hair that was in a half-up half-down style, dark purple eyes, and she was wearing light blue jeans with a light pink crop jumper. On Izuku's other side was a boy with light blue hair and blue eyes. He was wearing cargo briefs with a plain white shirt. The girl next to him was the most eager to introduce herself. Her name is Rei, she's 16 years old, only by 4 months, and her quirk is called Element. She seems really energetic and nice. Izuku liked her, he thinks they will get along well. The boy next to Izuku was introduced as Craven, though he wasn't the one introducing himself, Rei did it for him. Craven was a shy individual and didn't speak much, although, he was very kind and outgoing according to his friends. He was 15 and his quirk is called water manipulation. However, apparently he can manipulate any type of liquid, so, water manipulation probably isn't the best name, but it'll do. The next to get acquainted with Izuku was Blake. With the way he spoke and the way he held himself, you could tell that he was a very confident person. He had dark green hair with matching green eyes, his quirk was camouflage, pretty self-explanatory. He could change his skin and clothes to blend into his surroundings, basically he could go completely unseen. He was also 15 years old and he was dating one of the girls named Rue. We already know Enzo, but here's a little bit of extra information. He's 16 and had blonde hair, his eyes were yellow that glow when his quirk is activated. Said quirk is named Karma, exactly what it sounds like. He can make karma happen to anyone. He seemed nice enough, though he did have a mismatched demeanor. Sometimes when he spoke he sounded rude, other times he sounded fine. He was rather sarcastic, but honestly it was rather entertaining in Izuku's opinion. Sage, she was 15 with long black hair that pulled up into a high ponytail and red eyes. Her quirk was called gas. She could breath out any type of gas, whether it was lethal or non-lethal, it didn't matter. It doesn't hurt her in any way, though she did mention that she gets a sore throat if she uses her quirk too much. And finally there was a girl named Rue. She had short purple hair and pastel purple eyes. She was 15 and her quirk was pitch. She could change the pitch of her voice, high enough to make glass shatter or low enough to make someone dizzy or pass out. She was dating Blake. By the time the new group of friends were fully acquainted, it was the end of lunch and it was time for hero training. I forgot to mention, but over the course of the 6 weeks Izuku had before he started at his new school, Izuku's father was training him every day, not only learning to control his quirk but also getting his strength up. They would run together every morning, lift weights, spar with weapons and train in hand-to-hand combat. You would think that Izuku would have trouble, but he was a fast learner. He was able to fight his father with and without weapons like a pro by the end of the 6 weeks, so Izuku wasn't too worried about training, though he was still nervous. Luckily, Izuku's new friends had the same training class as him, so they all went to training together. "You know, I just realized that you didn't tell us your quirk, Izuku," Rei said as she walked next to him. That was another thing. Here in America everyone uses first name. Izuku's still trying to get used to it. "Oh, well, I have 2 quirks," Izuku told her nervously. "Really? What are they called?" Rei asked with a big smile. "My dad picked the names since I didn't know what to name them. One of them is called Hell's Angels and the other is called Necromorph," Izuku told her with a small smile. "My dad actually came up with these names for me since I didn't have a clue what to name them. So silent shout out to my papa, thumbs up, they're really cool names." "What do your quirks do?" she asked excitedly. "Well, the first one, I can basically summon ghosts, and when I do they have wings and a tail. Don't ask why, 'cause I don't know why. When they aren't summoned I can still communicate with them, but they just look like normal people. Though, only I can see them." "Makes sense?" Izuku asked, turning his head to look at her. "Yes, makes sense." "What's the point of the quirk though?" Rei asked curiously. "Well, there are about 6 different ghosts I can summon and they all have an individual power, so they help me in battle if needed," Izuku explained. "Oh, okay, I see. What about your other one?" I haven't really used that one much. It takes a lot of energy, so it's quite difficult to use. I can basically summon the dead." Izuku didn't elaborate as they got to the changing rooms and had to separate from the girls. "I'll tell you more later, see you once we're changed," Izuku said with a smile before following the boys into the boys' locker room. Izuku's timetable for school was different to the one he was used to in middle school. He had 2 PRDs, English and Maths, before they had a 30-minute free PRD for studying and finishing any work that was needed. Then Izuku had a lesson in the support course, and after that he had a lesson in quirk history, then lunch. Lunch was about an hour, so they had enough time to eat and talk to friends, charge up their energy for their next PRD, which was training. They had that for 2 hours, then they had half an hour to shower and change before school ends. In short, 8 to 9 o'clock, homeroom and chilling before class starts. 09:00-10:00 English, 10:00-11:00 Maths, 11:00-11:30 Studying, 11:30 to 12:30, Support Course, 12:30 to 1:30, Quirk History, 1:30 to 2:30, Lunch, 02:30-04:30, Training, 4:30 to 5 o'clock, Showers, 5 o'clock, End of day. Izuku wasn't expecting 2 hours of hero training, but he wasn't complaining either. Izuku was eager to control his quirks with hopefully little to no trouble. Though Izuku's training sections were long, they weren't anything too major to begin with. Just normal working out, lifting weights, doing laps around the field, normal type stuff, starting off easy. Once the hour mark hit, the training began to get more intense. Today they were learning hand-to-hand combat. The training teacher picked their pairs and everyone went to find a space and began to spar. It wasn't like the sparring Izuku had done with his dad, this was harder, everyone was fighting like their life depended on it. I guess that's why it's the best school in America. Luckily Izuku was paired up with someone he knew, Enzo was his partner. Let the best man win, Enzo stuck his hand out, let the best man win, Izuku shook his hand with a nod before they both backed up and got into their fighting stance. As soon as they had the go-ahead from the teacher they both charged at each other. Enzo went straight for a punch to the face but Izuku slid on his knees and went under him before popping back up on the other side. Enzo spun around only to be met with a punch to the gut, he stumbled back but composed himself instantly. They throw punches and kick left and right, dodging some and taking some hits. They were running out of time and Izuku wanted to end their match so he made a plan and waited for the perfect opportunity to strike. Once Enzo was back on his feet and swung his fist aiming for Izuku's jaw, Izuku's plan was set in motion. He grabbed Enzo's fist and yanked him towards himself before sweeping his legs under Enzo's and making him fall to the ground. The hand that was still holding Enzo's wrist tightened as he pushed the other boy down so he was face first into the floor, pinning his arm behind his back. Enzo tried to get out of his hold but Izuku was stronger. But just for extra measure Izuku put his knee onto Enzo's back just to make sure he stayed pinned. Enzo tapped out after a minuet of tying to escape Izuku's firm grip. Izuku immediately unpinned the boy and stood up, reaching a hand out to help the other up. Enzo took the hand that was offered to him and let himself be pulled up. You're a lot stronger than you look, Enzo stated with a grin. Good fight. Enzo held his hand out for another handshake. Izuku was happy to shake his hand with a grin of his own. So are you, you're a good fighter. I had a lot of fun. Alright, good work today everyone, don't forget to keep training, you're all good fighters but there is always room for improvement. I'll see you all tomorrow, have a good evening. Class dismissed, their teacher said before leaving. All the students were quick to rush back inside, wanting to take a shower before they had to leave. Good work out there today, for your first day you seem to be doing very well, Sage commented. The group of new friends had all showered and changed before meeting up outside the locker room so they could walk out of the school together. Enzo and Blake had been next to Izuku when changing and they saw all his scars, like the picture up top but not as many. They wanted to ask questions but the look on Izuku's face told them that he wasn't comfortable talking about it. They would ask about it eventually, when Izuku was more comfortable. Everyone was done except for Rue, so they were all waiting for her. Thank you Sage, I technically already finished school, since I've been doing online courses since I was about 10 so I've completed collage level work. And my dad's been training me for the past 6 weeks I've been here so that helped me with my fighting skills. Izuku didn't mean to say as much as he did but he felt oddly calm around her, the energy she gave off was comforting, he didn't feel like he would get judged by her. Maybe it has something to do with her quirk. Izuku thought to himself, so you're like, crazy smart then, she questioned, and 6 weeks. Did you know how to fight before that, she continued. No, everything I know now is what my dad has taught me in the last 6 weeks, Izuku said with a smile. I'm a fast learner, he added, remembering her first question. Before any more could be said Rue emerged from the ladies' locker room, bag slung over her shoulder and her hair still wet. Come on, I'm tired and want to go home, Rue said grumpily as she started down the hall. Everyone looked at each other before shrugging and following the tired girl out of the school. Third POV, Izuku's age, 18, it's been 3 years since Izuku moved to America to live with his dad. Izuku's life has been so much better in the last 3 years than it has been his whole life. He had an amazing group of friends, was top in all his classes, he wasn't bullied for being smart, the teacher were all nice to him and even gave him extra work when he asked since his knowledge was past average. Sage and Enzo started dating a year after Izuku moved there and they were honestly perfect for each other. Craven was still his shy, quiet self, but he had opened up to Izuku over the years and talked slightly more openly now. Rue and Blake were still dating as well. They were probably the most chaotic couple he has ever come across though. As for Rei and Izuku, they have a very close bond. In more context, Rei is a lesbian and Izuku is gay. They are the only homosexual people in their friend group, so they have a closer connection to each other than the rest. However, they are still very close to the others in their group. Rei and Izuku flirt with each other. They don't really know how it started, but they never brought it up and just continue to make flirtatious comments and give each other pet names. If you didn't know them, you would think they were a couple with how they acted. Even though Izuku was top of his classes and a more confident person than he used to be, he was still shy. He wasn't used to compliments even if he got them more often from his family and friends. He still flinches at certain touches, he still rambles about things he's passionate about and still stutters sometimes. Even though Izuku looks a lot different on the outside, he's still the same scared, abused, little boy that left Japan 3 years ago. He's just better at hiding his pain now. Speaking of Japan, Izuku's mother did report him as missing, but the investigation was dropped a couple of months later. They had found a puddle of blood at the bottom of a 5-story building, just no body. The cops just assumed that he had finished himself and he was moved by someone. Katsuki was told that Izuku had killed himself and for the past 3 years blamed himself for his death, and his temper only grew from there. He did get into you. Although, with a goal to become the #1 hero. Over the years Katsuki's temper was manageable and he was slightly calmer. Key word though, slightly. Back to Izuku. He did get a haircut a couple weeks after his school year started, but decided he was gonna grow it out again since he didn't like it that much. So his hair was past his shoulders but almost always in a ponytail. His hair was now pretty much fully light blue, just his roots were black. His eyes were half blue half green and he had a lip piercing as well as a eyebrow piercing. He also had a couple tattoos. The first one he got was a group tattoo. Rei, Sage, Blake, Enzo, Craven, Rue, and himself all got matching tattoos. Izuku has the tattoo 1-7 since he is kinda the leader of the group. Sage has 2-7 since she is the next most responsible, and the rest were just kinda random. Rei had 3-7, Craven had 4-7, Enzo had 5-7, Blake had 6-7 and finally Rei had 7. Izuku got this tattoo next. It doesn't have a meaning to it. He just thought it looked cool and decided to get it on the same day, getting this to remind himself to breath whenever he felt panicked. Having been abused most his life in the past, one wrong move from anyone could send him into a frenzy. Now whenever he felt like he was about to panic, he would look at his hands and count to 4 with his fingers to inhale, then use the hand with the tattoo to count down the seconds to exhale and do it till he felt calm. I hope that makes sense to you. This was the final tattoo he got himself. Since Izuku was 8 years old he had been hurting himself. He was 2 years clean. Since he lived with his dad who helped him stop, but he did have urges sometimes, but when he did he had his friends to help him as well as his father. Izuku makes jokes about suicide a lot, and he has tried to kill himself multiple times, but with his new quirk, he can't die. He got this tattoo to show his sexuality and his struggles. Does that make sense? Moving on, Izuku is now 18 and in the car on his way back home. His dad had messaged him just before school had ended telling him to come home straight after school instead of hanging out with friends, as he had something he needed to discuss with him, which made Izuku nervous since it was rather cryptic, not enthusiastic like his father's texts usually were. No emojis, no exclamation marks, just one text and that was it. Once Alan had pulled up to the house and the car pulled to a stop, Izuku was out the car and unlocking the front door before Alan could even turn in his seat to bid him a goodbye. "Dad," Izuku shouted into the house as he shut and locked the door behind himself, kicked his shoes off and dropped his bag by the door before rushing into the house to look for his father. "In here, son," his father's voice rang out. Izuku rushed into the direction of his father's voice, finding him in the living room, sat on the light gray couch with his laptop in front of him as he hunched over the coffee table. "Dad. Are you okay? The text you sent was rather cryptic and so not like you. You had me worried. I thought something had happened to you. I'm glad you're okay. Wait, are you okay? You look stressed." "What's the matter?" Izuku rambled as he sat next to his father. Izuku only stopped rambling when he saw the look on his dad's face. Izuku went to ask what was wrong again, but his father spoke up before he could utter a word. I got a promotion to be a heroics teacher at back in Japan. You also have an opportunity to become a student there to complete your last couple of years of school. Hizashi decided it was best if he just ripped the band-aid off and was blunt with his announcement instead of beating around the non-existent bush. It took a while for the information to sink in, and Hizashi sat there and waited for his outburst. What, there it was. Hizashi removed his hands from his ears. I haven't agreed to anything. I thought I would talk to you and get your opinion first. If you don't want to go, then I'll decline the offer, Hizashi said softly, not wanting to overwhelm his son. It's completely up to you, son. I don't mind either way, Hizashi commented after not getting a response. Izuku started quietly. Can I talk to my friends about it first? He asked, looking up at his dad. Of course you can, buddy, thanks. Izuku stood up and made his way to the living room door. I'll see you later, he called back, and then he was gone. Izuku walked out of his house and whipped out his phone to text on his friends' group chat. Their names: Izuku, Deadman Walking Skull Ray, Powerhouse Rue, Miss Attitude Sage Queen Bee Enzo, Tarzan Craven, Silent Soul Blake, See Me. Now you don't. The crackhead group chat: Deadman Walking These online Deadman Walking. Meet at our spot in 20 code 3 Deadman Walking is offline Queen Bee +5 are online Queen Bee, code come on guys we have to get to Izuku. Tarzan, code 3 what's code 3 again? Miss Attitude, really Enzo? You forgot one of our codes. Miss Attitude, again. Tarza, hey I'm sorry, okay, I'll remember in the future, I'm sure of it. Miss Attitude, sure you will. Powerhouse, code 3 means emergency Enzo, so we better get to Izu fast. Queen Bee, exactly, Izu might already be there, so hurry up and get your buttes up into our spot. If you're not there by the time I am, I'll beat your buttes to a pulp. Queen Bee is offline, See Me. Now you don't. We should probably get going, shouldn't we? Tarzan, yes we should. I don't want to face the wraith of Sage, and she's my girlfriend, so that's saying something. Powerhouse, hurry up guys, I'll see you there. Powerhouse is offline. Silent Soul, see you there. Silent Soul is offline. Tarzan, race you there. See Me. Now you don't. You're on. 2 users are offline. Miss Attitude, really guys, it's an emergency, not a game. Miss Attitude is offline. When the group of friends arrived, they saw Izuku pacing around the room. Their hangout spot was an abandoned building that they found 2 years again. They cleaned it up and added some furniture and decorations, and voila, their hangout spot was created. Izu, what's wrong? Sage asked in a soft tone as she slowly approached him. She didn't want to startle him, as she could tell he was freaking out about something. Izuku stopped pacing and faced the girl who had asked the previous question. Sage. Thank God you're here, I need your help. It might not seem that important, but to me it is, and I'm freaking out, cause I don't know what to do. I don't want to let my dad down, but saying no and Izuku was rambling, it was something he would do whenever he was nervous or stressed. It's an old habit that he had tried to get rid of, but I guess some old habits die hard. Izuku, honey look at me, Sage interrupted before he could spiral too far. Izuku looked up at her, there you go. What happened? What do you need my help with? She asked again calmly. Izuku sighed and flopped onto one of the couches. My dad got a promotion to be a heroics teacher, Izuku started. Hey, that's great isn't it? Blake asked as he sat in an empty armchair, pulling Rue down with him so she was sitting on his lap. It would be great if it wasn't a promotion from you, back in Japan, where my abusive, drunk mother and bullies lived. It would be great if I didn't have to choose whether or not to agree and go be a student there and possibly see my old bully who told me to kill myself the last time I saw him, Izuku exclaimed. On it's so great then, Blake mumbled. No, not so great, Izuku grumbled, slouching in his seat with his arms crossed over his chest. It was quiet for a while. Everyone had sat in their seats. Sage and Enzo were next to each other on one couch. Craven sat silently on a beanbag while Rei sat next to Izuku with her legs crossed, facing him. What if I came with you? Rei suddenly spoke. Huh, Izuku's head whipped round to face her. I said what if I came with you? I could ask my dad to let me go with you. You know my dad, he would trust your dad with my life any day. We could go to you. Together, and if your old bully tries anything I'll kick his butt, Ray exclaimed with a big grin, punching her fist in the air. I think that's a good idea, Rue spoke up, you've always said how much you wanted to go to you. Before you moved, and now you get the chance too, why would you give that opportunity up? Just because some kid told to go You should go back to Japan and show them, you're no pushover anymore. You're not the same weak quirkless kid you used to be, Rue smiled, which was a rare sight, show them how totally badass and strong you are. Izuku was stunned into silence before he sprung up and pulled Rue up into a hug, ignoring her protests. Thank you, he said into her shoulder. Rue sighed and patted his back. Alright, break it up. I want my girlfriend back. Blake stood from his chair and pulled them apart after a couple more seconds of them hugging. He pulled Rue to his chest and threw a playful glare at Izuku, who smiled and sat back in his seat, and faced Ray, who was excitedly bouncing in her seat. So when we leaving, third POV, he was on a plane, on his way back to Japan, his old home. After 3 years of living with not having to deal with abuse or torment, he was going back to the place where it all originated from, and there was nothing he could do about it now since he was already sat in the plane. Instead of complaining or wallowing in self-pity about his dumb shows, he decided to shove his headphones in instead and listen to music most of the plane ride over, arms crossed over his chest and looking out the window, a slight scowl on his face. Do you think he'll be okay? Ray asked Hizashi, who shrugged. We'll be by his side practically the whole time, so I'm sure he'll be fine, Hizashi told her, though he didn't sound too convinced himself. You know, Ray started after a beat of silence, he called a code 3 a few days ago when you first mentioned the whole moving thing to him. He was freaking out about moving back to Japan. Me and Rue convinced him, he's here because you know how much he hates disappointing people he loves. Ray explained with a sigh as she looked over to the grumpy boy. I wouldn't have been mad if he said he didn't want to go. I would have declined that offer in a heartbeat if he said no. He looked over to Izuku for a moment before returning his gaze to Ray. However, I do think it'll be good for him. I hope you're right. They didn't talk again. Both ended up falling asleep while Izuku stayed awake the whole flight. He continued to listen to his music and did some sketches in his sketchbook. Once they landed, Izuku woke both Hizashi and Ray up. They collected their bags from the bagging area before heading out onto the streets. It was weird for Izuku to be back here after so many years away. It didn't look much different from what he could remember, but there were more people and they all seemed like they were on autopilot. The way they moved around each other, they were in their own little worlds, not really paying attention to anything other than themselves. That was different. Hizashi called a cab so they could get a ride to you. Hizashi had told them the day before that when they landed they needed to go to you and talk with the principal, Netsu. Once they arrived they all got out and headed towards the a gate where a person was standing. He had past the shoulders-length black hair and was wearing a black baggy jumpsuit and what looked to be a long gray scarf around his neck, hands stuffed into his pockets with a slouch. By the man's feet was a bear or a mouse, maybe it was a dog. Ah, the #1 hero from America, his son and son's best friend. It's lovely to see you again, Hizashi, the bear, mouse, dog thing said. Hello again, old friend, Hizashi greeted with a smile. The F, Izuku whispered looking down at the small creature in curiosity. Ray smacked his arm hard with a huff. Ow. Jesus, what was that for? Izuku asked, rubbing his arm. It didn't actually hurt, he was just being dramatic. Watch your language around strangers. She said back, crossing her arms over her chest, glaring at him. Okay mom, he mocked, getting another hit, this time a jab to his ribs. Fuck, frick, okay. Just stop hitting me. Izuku said, stepping away from his best friend and next to his father who was watching with amusement. Are you done messing around? A gruff voice rang out. They looked over to the homeless-looking man. He had one eyebrow raised and his arms crossed. He looked like he needed a nap. Who are you? Izuku asked with a small head tilt, looking the man up and down. Why did he look so familiar? Underground Pro Hero Dash, the man started but was cut off by Izuku. Pro Hero Erasure Head, real name Shoyuta Aizawa, Class 3A's homeroom teacher. Izuku analyzed. How did you know that? Aizawa asked. Shock evident in his voice, he's like crazy smart. Rei informed, slinging her arm around Izuku's neck and bringing him down into a headlock, ruffling his hair. Izuku struggled in her hold for a moment, she was stronger than she looked okay. And he decided what he was going to do and wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her off the ground. Her hold on him fell in favor of not falling and held on to his shoulders. They were now face to face as Izuku lifted her off the ground. They smiled at each other before Izuku kissed Rei's forehead and put her back on the ground. His smile didn't leave his face as he turned back to his father, who was once again watching with amusement. He knew their weird flirty dynamic and always found it amusing to watch. So why Rei we here again? He asked, looking up slightly to meet his father's eyes. They were similar in height. Izuku was 5 feet 11 while Hizashi was 6 feet. We're here to see Nezu, he said with a smile and pointed to the small creature who had been watching the whole scene unfold with a wide smile. That's quite right, why don't you all follow me to my office where we can talk more in private, Nezu instructed, climbing onto Aizawa's shoulders. That's a wonderful idea, come on kids, Hizashi said happily as he practically skipped after the other adults. Sometimes I wonder if he's actually almost in his 40s, Izuku mumbled to Rei as they began to walk after them. Tell me about it, Rei giggled. Once everyone was settled down in some chairs, Nezu began, okay, it's pretty simple actually. First you guys will be living in the dorms. Hizashi, you'll be living in the dorm next to Aizawa's. Izuku and Rei, you'll be on separate floors since you are both opposite genders, but they will only be a floor down so it's not too far as I know you are both very close, Nezu explained with a smile. The other thing is, you have today to decorate your dorms, then tomorrow class starts. You'll be in Class 3A with Aizawa and Hizashi as your hero trainers. Sound good? Nezu asked, taking a sip of tea. When the F did he get that? Yes, but I have a question, Izuku asked, getting a nod in response. He continued. What are the rules for the dorms? Like, can I smoke or do I have to go outside or something? As you are an adult, I'll allow you to smoke freely, but please be mindful of the other students that are in the dorms. As for the other rules, your curfew is 11 p.m., no sneaking around after that time. No fights and try not to break anything, Nezu answered. Okay, that's pretty basic. Thank you, Izuku bowed his head slightly in thanks. It's my pleasure, now you all must hurry along and set up your dorms, then rest. You have a busy day tomorrow with classes and meeting new classmates and students. Thank you for your time, Nezu. It was nice seeing you again. Hizashi shook his paw with a big grin. It was good seeing you two old friends. Now run along, Aizawa will escort you to the dorms. After they all said goodbye, they were off in the direction of the dorms. So, Izuku dragged on, are there teacher dorms and student dorms, or is it one big building? I've never been in dorms before, so this is interesting, asked Izuku as he walked next to the sleepy hero, who in return sighed deeply. Separate dorms, he answered in short. Oh, okay, can I ask you some questions about your quirk? Izuku questioned, walking in front of the hero backwards. Aizawa sighed, sure kid, as Izuku asked question after question about the hero's quirk. Hizashi and Rei watched with smiles on their faces. He seemed so happy and carefree in that moment, and they were both hoping that Hizashi was right, and this was exactly what Izuku needed. Third POV. Izuku woke up the next day with a feeling of dread in the pit of his stomach. He got up and ready for school, then went straight into the kitchen that was on the bottom floor next to the common room. He met Rei on the way down and she sat on the kitchen counter as Izuku made them both breakfast. They were up later than the rest of the class today, so they didn't bombard the two with questions. Once they had finished and their dishes were clean and dry, they made their way to the school. So are you going to tell me why you're so quiet today, or am I gonna have to force it out of you? Rei asked as they entered the school. I don't know, just have a bad feeling, that's all, Izuku answered honestly. Well, I'm sure everything will be okay, she responded, nudging him with her shoulder. Izuku just hummed. They soon made it to the Class 3A doors and knocked. "Come in," Aizawa's voice called through the door. They both walked in and all heads turned to them. "These are the new students," Aizawa told his class in his normal tired voice. "Introduce yourselves and get to know your new classmate." "I'm taking a nap," Aizawa said to the two best friends before climbing into his sleeping bag and facing the wall. "Hi, my name's Ray, nice to meet you," Ray exclaimed with a smile, turning to the class. "This is Izuku Midoriya, he's a little shy," she teased. "I am not shy," Izuku glared at her slightly. But didn't address the class at all. His eyes were glued to a boy with ash blonde hair and crimson red eyes. "Who's that?" Ray asked after noticing Izuku's slight wide-eyed stare, before his face turned into a scowl. "Katsuki Bakugo," the blonde eyes widened. "Fancy seeing you here," Izuku said sarcastically. "Where the F have you been?" Bakugo asked standing from his seat. "Oh, you know, to the afterlife, then to America when that didn't work," he said with a dramatic sigh and a head shake. The blonde's eyes went wider, if that was even possible. "Okay," Ray gained their attention. "I'm like really lost, mind explaining who this is?" "Ray, meet my lovely ex-best friend, bully and tormenter, Kaken," Izuku did sarcastic jazz hands. Ray facepalmed. "Aizu, honey, you really need to stop hanging out with Enzo. He's rubbing off on ya." Izuku rolled his eyes. "Whatever, mom," Ray hit his chest. "Stop calling me that unless you want me to actually start treating you like my kid. Trust me, you won't like it," she threatened. Izuku put his hands up in surrender. Someone cleared their throat and the two turned, now remembering that they were in a room full of people. "Hi, I'm Mina, nice to meet you," a girl with pink hair and skin introduced herself. "Oh, you're really pretty, Aizu, doesn't she look pretty?" Ray gushed, and the pink-haired girl's skin turned a shade darker. Izuku raised an eyebrow. "Ray, never mind." "Yes, she's pretty," he rolled his eyes. "I know, right?" Ray exclaimed. Izuku sighed at his best friend and went to the back of the class to sit in an empty seat, but halted when he caught someone's eye. A blonde boy with a black lightning strike imprinted in his hair, piercing yellow eyes, and he had a curious look on his face, but when he met Izuku's eyes he smiled sweetly at him. Izuku tried to contain his blush at the pretty boy smiling at him. He managed a smile before rushing to his seat. He crossed his arms over the table and buried his face into them. Why was he blushing from someone smiling at him? People smiled at him all the time back in America, so why was this any different? It didn't take long for the bell to ring and Aizawa to get up. He was saying something, but Izuku wasn't paying attention. He only lifted his head when he heard the door open and a familiar voice rang out. "Hello students, my name is Hizashi Midoriya and I'm your new hero training teacher. It's nice to meet you all." Izuku's dad introduced himself with a big smile. "Do you have any questions before we start training?" A couple hands raised. Pink-haired girl. "My name's Mina Ashido. Are you related to Izuku Midoriya?" she asked, pointing to the back where Izuku was sat. "Yes, he's my son," Hizashi replied with a smile and a small wave towards Izuku, who waved back with a smile of his own. "Ah, that must be so cool. Having your dad as a teacher," Mina said towards Izuku, who shrugged. "Any more questions?" "You with the brown hair, my name's Uraraka Achiko, I just wanted to know what you did for a living before you came here. Were you a teacher there too?" she asked. No, I wasn't a teacher. I lived in America as the #1 pro hero. This is my first time teaching, so I hope I do a good job," Hizashi explained. "Oh, okay," she seemed happy with the answer, and Izuku looked at her skeptically. He was going to keep an eye on her, she seemed sketchy. "Any more questions?" "No." "Okay, right, everyone go. Change and meet me on the field." Hizashi nodded towards the door and smiled as he saw everyone rush out the room. Izuku and Ray parted ways to head to their separate locker rooms. Izuku walked in and found an empty locker which he claimed as his own and began to undress. The loud chatter bounced to the walls as they were changing, not really focusing on anyone else but themselves and the people they were holding conversation with. Izuku changed his breaths first, then pulled his shirt over his head hesitantly. Izuku felt eyes on him and turned to his left to see the blonde boy from earlier looking at him with a head tilt. His eyes scanned over Izuku's scars, but he didn't look disgusted at all. Just curious and a hint of worry. The picture up top, but with more on his arms from self-harm, yes. Izuku addressed the boy, which seemed to break him out his little trance. Sorry for staring, I just, never mind. Sorry again, the blonde boy said, only loud enough for Izuku to hear. It's okay, you can ask if you want, Izuku mumbled back, slipping his long-sleeved shirt over his head. Just not here, so hurry up and we can walk and talk. Izuku states as he watched the boy slip his shirt on and shoes before they both left together. I'm Kaminari Denki, by the way, in case you were wondering, he mumbled as they started down the hall. Nice to meet you, Kaminari, as you know my name's Izuku, he replied with a nod. So, what did you have to go through to get all those scars? The boy asked after a beat of silence. That was weird. Normally when someone asks about his scars they just say, how'd you get them? Never, what did you go through? Why did his heart thump in his chest when he said that? Ever since I was 4 my mother abused me and my best friend tormented me, all because I was diagnosed as quirkless. Izuku stated, sounding unfazed. Are you quirkless? No. But I thought I was until I jumped off a building in hopes of ending it all, only to find out I had a quirk this whole time, well, 2 of them. I just needed to die to activate them. Izuku explained with a small huff. When you came in this morning and you said that Bakugo was your ex-best friend, bully and tormentor. Is he the person you're talking about, or were there others? That was actually a good question. Katsuki was the main one, but there were others who joined in on the fun. He emphasizes fun. I knew he was a hothead, but I didn't think he would have bullied anyone, the blonde said, but he didn't seem too surprised. Yeah, well, people are assholes, so it doesn't surprise me anymore when people turn out to be just that, Izuku said, opening the door for the blonde and following him out onto the field where his dad and Aizawa were standing. They were talking about something. Hizashi had a big smile of his face as well as a small blush. Aizawa didn't seem that different, but if you looked closely you could see a slight blush on his face too. No effin' way, Izuku whispered before breaking out in a grin. What is it? Denki asked with confusion. My dad is totally crushing on Mr. Aizawa. And by the looks of things so is he, Izuku cackled, drawing the attention of the 2 heroes. Oh, hello Izuku, you have any problems with the boys when changing? Hizashi asked, walking towards them. Nope, have any trouble trying to fue Aizawa? Izuku asked with a smug smirk. What? No, I mean, I have no idea what you're talking about, Hizashi flushed red from embarrassment. It's fine Dad, you know I don't mind, Izuku reassured his father with a soft smile and a quick hug. Before any more could be said the rest of the class came out, so they moved away and Hizashi began his lesson. Okay, so for your first lesson we'll be practicing hand-to-hand combat, so I can see what you can do. The redhead raised his hand. Yes. Why aren't we using out quirks like normal? He asked curiously. Hizashi smiled. Does anyone know why we're learning hand-to-hand combat instead of using our quirks? You can't always rely on your quirk. If you do and you come across a villain that has an erasing quirk or a quirk that rivals yours, then you're going to need to know how to fight. Not only that, but you need physical strength in everyday life. It's just common sense, Izuku informed when no one else did. Thank you Izuku, Hizashi nodded at his son. He's correct, so everyone find a partner and spread out. I'll come around and help you with your forms and anything else you might need. Remember, no quirks, Hizashi instructed. As everyone began finding partners, Izuku went to look for Rei but found her already with Mina and sighed. You can be my partner if you like, Denki asked from beside him. Sure, they both moved away from the others and into a big clearing. And got into a fighting stance. As soon as they heard Izuku's dad blow a whistle they began their match. Just so you know, I got some of these ideas from Google cause I wanted it to sound good and cause I suck at fight scenes. I did alter it though, so not all of it is. They threw a variety of strikes at each other. including punches, kicks, and knee strikes. Each strike is delivered with precision, aiming to land on target areas while avoiding the opponent's defenses. As they fought, they used their arms and legs to block incoming strikes, dodging and weaving to avoid getting hit. After a successful block or dodge, they often follow up with a counterattack, trying to catch their opponent off guard. Izuku grabbed Denki's wrist and yanked him forward, successfully knocking him off balance, but Denki was quick enough to pull Izuku down with him. They began to wrestle on the ground, trying to pin each other. They rolled around for a good few minuets until Denki finally managed to pin Izuku. Denki breathed a little while Izuku tried to wiggle his way out of his grip, though as he continued to struggle Denki just applied more pressure. "There's no getting out of this, I'm afraid," Denki said confidently. Izuku stilled and stared up at him for a moment. Denki looked really pretty and Izuku almost found himself getting lost in the other's eyes but forced himself to focus. He came up with a plan in seconds. "You sure?" Izuku didn't give him time to respond, wrapping one of his legs around Denki's back and pushing up with his body, flipping them so Izuku was on top, pinning his wrists above his head while pressing his knee onto his chest so he couldn't move. Izuku huffed triumphantly as he stared at the yellow-haired boy. "You were saying?" he asked with a giddy smile. Denki didn't respond and just stared. This time Izuku let himself get lost in Denki's bright yellow eyes, but it only lasted a moment before they were startled by the whistle. Izuku let Denki go and got off of the boy, standing, and reached a hand out to the other. Denki gladly took his hand and allowed himself to be pulled up. "Good match," said Izuku with a small blush. Denki smiled at him. "Yeah, good match." The final bell rang and everyone made their way back to the dormitories in their groups of friends. Rei and Izuku were walking by themselves, but Mina, Denki, Shiro, Kirishima and Bakugo, not by his own free will, insisted on walking together. "So, what's it like in America?" Shiro asked, slinging an arm around Denki. Izuku glared at him slightly. "I don't really know how to explain it, but I would say it's more lively. More free, not as many rules or expectations," Rei said when realizing Izuku was glaring at Shiro, and nudged him with her arm. "Well, that sounds nice. What did you guys do in your free time?" Mina asked this time. "Oh, you know, smoke, skate, get tattoos and try to kill yourself," Izuku responded this time, a sarcastic tone in his voice. Rei elbowed him in the side. "What have I told you about making suicide jokes and SHT, she said angrily. "Not to do it," he replied with an eye roll. "And what did you do?" "I made a joke." "Well, it wasn't even really a joke, was it?" "It's the truth and always tell me to tell the truth, so what you whining about?" Izuku grumbles. "Don't be a smartass, Izuku." Izuku just pouted. "Does he say things like that all the time?" Kirishima asked, eyebrows furrowed. "Yes, he gets it from Enzo," Rei sighed. "Who's Enzo?" Denki asked. "Enzo is one of our friends from back home. He's one of the most sarcastic people I know and he's rubbed off on Iz and now he's worse than Enzo, 'cause of his suicide jokes." Rei rubbed her forehead with a groan. "Hey, I'm not that bad," Izuku whines. "From what I heard so far, you kinda are, dude," Shiro mentions, finally removing his arm from around Denki, and Izuku's glare subsided. His pout still remained on his face though. "When we get back to the dorms, do you all want to watch a movie?" Denki asked. Izuku immediately nodded. Sure, and that was how they ended up huddled in the common room, lights off and movie playing. Mina and Rei were huddled together under a blanket. Next to them was Bakugo and Kirishima in a similar position but not cuddled up. Shiro was on a single chair with his phone in hand, not really invested in the movie. Denki and Izuku were sat next to each other. There was a big blanket laying across their laps. Denki had one arm thrown over the back of the couch near Izuku's head and Izuku wanted nothing more than to lean onto the blonde. Izuku didn't know what he was feeling. He had only been back in Japan for a day and he had already found someone who he wanted to be around, made his heart skip a beat every time they looked at him or smiled. It was agonizing, and yet Izuku found himself looking at Denki as well, smiling whenever he talked to him or was in his presence. Izuku didn't know what the feeling was, but he didn't want it to go away. So he leaned into Denki's side hesitantly, and when Denki made no move to push him away, Izuku snuggled up to him, pushing his body right up against Denki's side and laying his head on his chest. When doing so he realized his breathing was uneven, waiting for Denki to say something, and for a while he was tense and had his eyes squeezed shut, but then he felt an arm wrap around him slightly and start rubbing up and down his arm gently. Only then did Izuku finally relax and opened his eyes. He didn't look up at Denki, cause he knew himself well and knew he would freak out and move away himself, so instead he just wrapped one arm around Denki's stomach and buried his head into the other's chest. Denki realized that Izuku finally untensed but didn't stop his hand from rubbing at his arm. Denki was happy that Izuku was comfortable around him, even if he was tense when he was. Denki also felt that strange feeling, whenever Izuku smiled back at him his stomach burst with butterflies and he felt his face warm. He knew exactly what it meant and he didn't want it to go away, so when he felt Izuku snuggled close to him, he felt almost sick, but in a good way. The butterflies in his stomach didn't subsided for a while, but even then he could still feel his heart racing slightly. Izuku fell asleep like that. Tucked securely under Denki's arm, pushed up against his body. Maybe this move wasn't going to be as bad as Izuku thought. Third POV, when Izuku woke up he was unexpectedly warm and cuddled up to what felt like a body. He slowly peeled his eyes open and lifted his head up a few inches to look around. The first thing he noticed was that he was still in the common room. There was a small ray of light shining through the curtains and Izuku could tell that it was early morning, so the room was empty. The next thing he noticed was when he looked down he saw he was in fact pressed up against a body. That body being none other than Denki Kaminari, the boy he had fallen asleep on the night before. Izuku leant up on one arm so he had the perfect view of Denki's face. His lips were slightly parted, air falling past his lips with every rise and fall of his chest. His hair was a mess, sprawled out on the couch beneath them. Denki shifted onto his side, his grip tightening around Izuku's waist, making him fall back down and laying on his side facing the blonde. Some hair fell in front of the blonde's face and Izuku instinctively lifted his hand and casually brushed it back out the way. Izuku's hand stayed in the blonde's hair, pushing through it gently with his fingers, blunt nails dragging along his scalp occasionally. He would twirl the ends of his hair around his fingers before going back to running his hand through it. As Izuku was doing this he started to zone out, staring just past Denki's head instead of his face. That was how Denki found Izuku when he woke up. Zoned out and playing with his hair. Denki lay there for a while and stared at Izuku, loving the feeling of his hands in his hair. By the time Izuku zoned back in, half an hour had gone by since Denki had woke up. He wouldn't admit it if you asked him, but he startled when looking back down at Denki only to find him awake and already staring back at him. He started to retract his hand and apologize, but Denki's hand shot up and grabbed the retreating hand, leading it back to his hair. "Don't apologize, keep going please," Denki whispered to him. Izuku was hesitant but continued his illustrations. This time he kept eye contact with the blonde. Denki sighed in content and leaned into Izuku's touch, moving forward to stuff his face under Izuku's chin, breaking eye contact and hugging him close. They both entangled their limbs and baked in each other's warmth. Denki and Izuku only pulled away when people began filling the common room about an hour later, already ready for school. They hesitantly parted ways and headed back to their dorms to get ready themselves. Izuku was ready first. He walked back down into the common room and went straight into the kitchen where he found Mina and Rei chatting. "Hey guys, what you doing?" Izuku asked, leaning on the counter opposite them with his arms crossed. He tried putting on a happy face, but to be frank, he already missed the warmth that radiated off Denki and just wanted to be near the blonde again. "Oh hey Izuku, we were waiting for you," Rei responded with a grin. Izuku raised an eyebrow. "And why were you waiting for me?" he asked. "So you could cook up breakfast of course," she exclaimed with a cheeky grin. Izuku sighed and shook his head. "You're so lazy sometimes, Rei, always relying on me to make you food. What would you do without me, huh?" Izuku continued mumbling to himself as he walked around the small kitchen, getting out ingredients that he would need to make his friend's breakfast. Rei just smiled and turned back to Mina, continuing their conversation as if she hadn't just heard her best friend calling her lazy or mumbling profanities. Denki soon emerged from the elevator and into the common room, fiddling with his tie but ultimately giving up. He knew he wouldn't be able to do it, so he just left it hanging loosely around his neck and walked past the dining table where Mina and Rei now were and into the kitchen where Izuku was. Denki smiled when he saw Izuku and sat on the counter next to where Izuku was working. Izuku looked up and smiled at him before focusing on the food again, the smile not leaving his face. Once the food was done, he plated it all up onto 4 plates. He walked to the dining table and gave Mina and Rei a plate of food each before going back into the kitchen and putting a plate of food next to Denki. Izuku didn't say anything when he reached up and started fixing up Denki's tie. He didn't say anything when he was done either, just picked up Denki's food again and handed it to him before grabbing his own and going back to the dining table, sitting down and silently eating his food. He wanted to be near Denki, but now he was just shy and embarrassed. Denki, however, smiled to himself and began eating his food. "Izuku, can you come up here and help demonstrate a spar?" Hizashi asked, receiving a nod in return from his son. All of Class 3A was standing on the field again in their gym clothes waiting for further instructions. Hizashi told them they were learning hand-to-hand combat again, but this time he wanted to demonstrate first. Izuku left Denki's side and walked to the front and stood in front of his father. "I want you all to watch carefully, watch how we move around each other to get in hits and also how we block and defend. At the end I want one of you to tell me if you notice anything in our fight and what we could have done differently," Hizashi told his class. Aizawa was off to the side watching them. It was still his class, but Hizashi was the new hero training teacher alongside Aizawa, so he needed to still be there. "Again, I used Google to help with some of this, though I did alter it to make it more of my own." Izuku and Hizashi got into a stance and got ready, both fighters maintaining a focused and determined expression. They circle each other, each step calculated and deliberate. Izuku makes the first move with a swift jab aimed at his opponent's face. Hizashi, anticipating the attack, dodges to the side and counters with a low kick aimed at Izuku's legs. The kick is blocked, and the sound of the impact echoes slightly, just loud enough for the group of students to hear. The exchange continues with a flurry of punches, kicks, and defensive maneuvers. Izuku attempts a high roundhouse kick, but Hizashi ducks under it and responds with a quick elbow strike to the ribs. Both fighters are agile and quick, their movements a blur of precision and power. As the spar progresses, the father-son duo demonstrate their mastery of various techniques, from grappling and throws to strikes and blocks. Sweat glistens on their brows, and their breathing becomes more labored, but neither shows any sign of backing down. The sparring session is intense but controlled, with both fighters respecting the rules and boundaries of the practice. It's a display of not just physical prowess but also mental discipline and strategic thinking. Soon Hizashi had Izuku pinned to the ground and the demonstration was over. He helped his son off the ground, and after making sure he wasn't injured, he turned back to the class who all had their mouths agape. "So what could we do differently? And did you notice anything in particular with our fight?" Hizashi asked his class, wiping some sweat off his forehead. Momo raised her hand. "Momo," Hizashi nodded. "Well, I noticed that Midoriya goes in rather strong, but he also assesses and calculates his next moves but also his opponents with precision," she stated, "and I didn't really see anything wrong with the fight." "So that's it, I think," Momo finished. "Very good, Momo," Hizashi praised. "Write everyone into pairs and off you go. Practice your hand-to-hand combat with everything you got," he continued with a smile. Izuku instantly went to Denki and they paired up again. "Ready to get your butt kicked again, Kami?" Izuku asked with a smirk, getting into his stance. "Are you?" Denki replied with a smirk of his own, mirroring Izuku's position. "You're on, F in hell," Izuku groaned from his place lead on the floor. "You hit hard." "Sorry," Denki breathed out from his place on the ground next to Izuku. They had both ended their spar with Izuku winning, but they were both exhausted and aching from the hits they had taken. "Nah, you're all good," Izuku waved his hand before groaning again and sitting up, wincing at the sharp pain that shot through his ribs. "Do you need a hand to recovery girl's office?" Denki asked, siding up alongside Izuku and facing him. "No, it's fine, I'll heal on my own," Izuku muttered as he slowly stood. What do you mean? Denki asked, following suit. I heal faster than others, 'cause of my quirk, Izuku told the blonde as they slowly walked back to the rest of the group. Denki hesitantly put an arm around Izuku's waist to help him walk. When Izuku didn't say anything and put his arm around Denki's shoulder for support, Denki held him a little closer, more firmer. Good job everyone, you can go shower and change before going back to the dorms. Head to Recovery Girl's office if you are injured though. You're dismissed, Hizashi shooed them off with a proud grin. Denki continued to help Izuku walk as they made their way to the locker rooms. They had a conversation going which didn't stop when they got there and slowly began to change. Good work today, your strategies are getting better, Izuku commented, slipping off his muddy shirt and put it in his bag, making a mental note to wash it later that day. You think so? Denki questioned with a small blush. Izuku hummed, turning to face him with a small smile. Really? You were amazing. It's not very often someone can actually land any hits, especially not as powerful as some of yours were. It was awesome, Izuku beamed before wincing, then hunching slightly. Thank you, but are you sure you don't want to go to Recovery Girls? Denki grimaced. I'll be fine by tomorrow, Izuku breathed before standing up straight again and facing Denki with a small smile. By now everyone had left the changing rooms and headed back to the dorms, so it was only Izuku and Denki left. They finished changing, Izuku slower than the blonde since he was injured, and started for the door, but Izuku tripped. He tripped over his own 2 feet, 'cause his legs felt like jelly with how tired he was. Luckily Denki caught him before he could hit the ground and pulled him back up, and when he did they were so close that their noses were almost touching. They stared into each other's eyes for a moment, and just like the day before they lost themselves in the other's eyes. They both began leaning in slowly, still holding eye contact as if they were in a trance, only to jump away from each other a few seconds later as the door slammed open. They both froze as Kirishima walked in. He saw the two and waved with an enthusiastic, "Hey bros," before going to his locker, grabbing his bag that the two assumed he had left there by accident, and strolling out again. The first one to unfreeze was Izuku. He scrambled to apologize for, he didn't even know what, the tripping or the almost kiss they almost shared, maybe even both, but he was frantic. He didn't know what to do. A deep blush spread across his face as spluttered out nonsense in his panicked state. Denki watched Izuku stutter his way through apology after apology, thinking how cute he looked in that moment, but soon snapped out of it when he realized Izuku really had began to panic and he saw how frantic he was. Denki gently cupped Izuku's face. "Hey, breathe. That's it. Don't apologize, you're fine," the blonde reassured the brunette, rubbing slow soft circles along his still red cheeks. Izuku took a few deep breaths before nodding and leaning into Denki's hand. "Come on, we should get back to the dorms," Denki muttered with a sigh. Izuku grumbled under his breath but nodded, though he didn't move. Denki smiled and pulled away. Izuku almost whined at the loss of the blonde's warm, comforting touch but stopped himself just in time and instead huffed. Denki opened the door for Izuku, what a gentleman, and then shut it behind them when they left. Denki casually slipped his hand into Izuku's and intertwined them together. Izuku smiled at the action and looked away so the blonde couldn't see his blush. Okay, so maybe this move would definitely be a good thing. Izuku thought as he began to swing his and Denki's conjoined hands between them with a little more pep in his step.